The Growth Happens Dawn to Dusk podcast with Matt Devitt. He talks with people about their journey, where they succeeded and failed, to help others on their quest. We're all on a journey that starts and ends every day. This is when we grow between dawn and dusk. And now, your host, Matt Devitt.
Welcome, everybody, to the Growth Happens Dawn to Dusk podcast. This is Matt Devitt taking you on another journey with a good friend of mine, Shane Wilson. So we're going to be talking to Shane about mentorship, what he's done as he came up through his career from starting out as a process engineer all the way through being a plant manager. So just an interesting journey he's went on, and a lot of really good insight from somebody that always look to find ways to get new opportunities, new exposure, while just understanding the risk and just some really, really solid ways of evaluating how to make a good decision. Had a fantastic time talking to Shane. Before we get into that, just want to thank everybody for supporting the podcast. It really means a lot to me. All of the likes, the shares, subscribes. Definitely, if you think this is helping somebody or helping yourself or could help somebody else, by all means, please share it, get it out there. And anything you can do, always appreciated on my end. So thank you again. So with that being said, without further ado, Shane Wilson. Shane, thank you much for coming on the podcast. Really looking forward to talking with you today about your experience coming up through the ranks as a engineer in the fine world of cement, somewhat similar to myself, the rock dust industry, as we affectionately call it. So definitely, thank you for coming on.
Hey, thank you, Matt. I really appreciate the opportunity.
So one of the things that I found interesting and for the audience out there, so we've crossed paths many a times as you were a plant manager out at CMAX, out in the Colorado area. So I was supporting you as a vendor, and now we're definitely on the outside looking in as far as being vendors to the greater cement industry as well as heavy industry in and of itself. But you graduated in 2002, just like myself, and got right into cement again, just like I did. So I feel like we're kindred spirits to a certain point. But what led you to getting into working in the cement industry back in 2002?
Yeah, really it was, I guess, opportunity knocks, so to speak. While I was in college and at the University of Alabama, I had interned with TVA, Tennessee Valley Authority. My father had spent most of his career actually in power generation, both coal-fired power plants, hydroelectric dams, a little bit in nuclear. And so I'd worked for TVA in college, which wasn't super exciting, at least the things that I was doing, probably just brushing the surface and, a lot of kind of control valves and piping networks. And I had an opportunity to work for them coming out of college, and then randomly, and I still really to this day do not know why, but it was my last semester in school, mechanical engineering. And I got into one of my classes, and there was a note on my desk saying, "See the dean of the mechanical engineering department after class." And so I went and saw her, and she said, "Hey, I've got a former student that works for a cement company. She's looking for a mechanical engineer, and I thought of you that you would be a good fit. And so if you're interested here, call her. If not, no problem." And again, I knew the dean and she knew me. It's a pretty small engineering school, but it wasn't a close relationship. So I really have never put those pieces of the puzzle together. But I ran it to ground and had a phone interview, and then went down to the Demopolis plant, which is about an hour south of where I went to school, and just met all of the guys. I spent a full day on the plant site, touring around with the maintenance manager and maintenance planner, and really had a good day. And one of the things that I guess kind of drew me to it is they talked a lot about, I guess, a combination of office time and field work. And it was something where at that, for sure at that stage in my life, I wasn't looking to be in an office all of the time. I really wanted to be outside. I feel like I'm pretty hands-on. I like to, understand how something works by, seeing it and getting involved in the field, and that was going to give me that opportunity. And so that's really how it started.
Completely makes sense. That was similar to mine, except I'm a chemie, and so they geared us more towards the petroleum industry. And back in '02, petroleum wasn't doing anything, so I just started looking around,
Yeah.
going, okay, who else needs chemical engineer slash potentially process engineers or anything like that. And Lafarge at the time was, looking for some of those people, and they were in northern Michigan, and I was going to school at Michigan Tech, so it wasn't that far away. And yeah, similar kind of deal. It just happened to, fall together into place, and never really got out of it. So the
Yeah.
hands-on
Yeah.
portion was a big part of what drew you into it. But then you worked your way up to plant management within the company. So, do you see the hands-on portion? Did that, how did that kind of drive your ability to move up and then, basically switch to a management role?
Yeah, I would say it aided me. Let's put it that way. I mean, typically, there's plants range in sizes, but the majority of the workforce in a plant are typically skilled trades, right? And so it's guys that spend the majority of their day out either inspecting equipment, checking from an operational perspective, maintaining equipment, doing repairs and things like that. And so that's really the bulk of the workforce. And what I've found just over the years is managers in a lot of these facilities come and go. Maybe every 3 to 5 years or something like that. Senior managers in a plant, meaning department managers, plant manager, that sort of thing. They tend to come and go, but the hourly workforce are really kind of the engine that makes things go, if you will, and they're the ones that are there. They're not moving around, and they're not going to be a mechanic in one plant and move to another plant and be a mechanic. At least it's a lower probability, right? And so I think my tendency or my draw to be out in the field and kind of rub shoulders with those guys, and at the same time come across, hopefully more times than not, that I wanted to learn from them, and not, hey, let me tell you, how you need to do this because I don't know. Coming from a really genuine curiosity and desire to learn, I think built some equity there. And so most of the plants that I've worked in, I think I had good relationships with all levels of the organization, and I think that really helped me gain some respect. And then when I had an opportunity to actually lead some of these groups, at least my intent was to lead from, hey, we're doing this together, and not lead for, let me point and you're going to go, right? So I think that helped me move in that direction, and I guess probably kept me going in some respects too. I think that it kept things fresh. You're not sitting behind a computer nonstop and just crunching numbers.
Yeah, agreed. Sounds like what you used was the opportunity to build up some of that personal capital, as well as some of the professional or performance capital. So if you ever had to make a withdrawal, at least you weren't, in the red with trying to get
Exactly.
things done. So that's always important. So what did you so you did process engineering work? It looks like you've done, and we talked about this, you've done like maintenance, which of course has projects and stuff like that. Um, what did you what do you like, so when you're building up within your progression, what did you see any common threads that, hey, if I keep doing this, whatever it might be, repeating over and over again, this is what's helping me gain more responsibility or visibility within the plant?
Yeah. Yeah. I guess that, a common thread was listening. And I'll go into a little bit more of that. But yeah, I had a lot of opportunities to do a lot of different things. And for sure, that's what kept me with the same company for as long as I worked for them, because there was continual opportunities. And I think that it remains the case in the industry today, that if you're willing to, stick with it and work hard, that there's going to be a lot of opportunities for people. But yeah, coming back to your question, I think it was really listening to the people that were there and that had been there. Let's be honest. I'm not going to come in and have all the answers just because you give me a title of maintenance manager or plant manager or something like that. And so, what I found is trying to listen to people and then, execute the things that they feel like are going to move the needle. It probably helped in large part make me successful over my career. I remember I had a boss and he was really a mentor of mine for many years. And one of the plants, the plant that I ultimately managed, he was the plant manager before me, and was just a really, really good guy, and really looked up to him. But one of the things that I noticed, he really helped improve the plant's image in the public, as well as environmental regulators. And I was like, man, he had all these great ideas. Well, a few years after he had left and I had taken over being plant manager, I found a document that was actually from the late 90s. And one of the former departmental managers had went through and essentially had roundtable meetings with all of his employees and said, hey, we need to improve our public impression or perception. We need to do a better job with compliance and things like this. What should we do? And this document that I found was just a compilation of all of the things all of the hourly employees had stated that we should do. And when I went back and looked at what, my mentor had done, literally a decade later, everything that he had done was on that list. And so it was a reminder for me, or maybe a dawning of, so to speak, of saying, man, if you just listen to the people that are there and that have been there, more times than not, they're not going to steer you in the wrong direction, because they have a vested interest. They want that plant to succeed. And so, I think a common theme of all my positions were at least, trying my best to listen to the people that I was working with, working for, and that were working for me as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. Within actually any manufacturing, or it can be any job in general, but where there's that core group that, they have all sorts of names, right? The steady eddies, or, the, like the B-level player, which I never quite agreed with, but, they're not the shooting star, but they come in, they do a great job day in, day out. They like what they do, but they're not really into the rat race to move up.
Right.
When you can find that group and then tap into the whole, do the theoretical, like, okay, if you were running this, what would you do to make it better? It's almost a bottomless well of ideas and potential that comes out of that. They're just looking for somebody to act on it, because they kind of know where their authority or their ability to move the needle kind of stops. And they're hoping that you can just, take it that remainder and actually make it happen.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. It's the whole adage of, two heads are better than one, or three heads are better than one. For sure. If you're managing a group of 10, 20, 40 people, it doesn't matter how smart or how driven you are, you can only take things so far unless you have everyone working together and being a part of that. It takes stopping and listening.
Yeah, and looking at the career that you had, you went from being technical and then sliding over to the managerial role, and always found it interesting within heavy industry how, for some reason, there seems to be this assumption, in my perception completely, but this assumption that every engineer that comes in wants to be a manager. Like, they want to be a supervisor of people and stuff like that. I've always found that interesting, because there's engineers that I've met that were like, no, I just want to keep doing this. Like, they don't want to run crews and they don't want to do anything like that. What do you think helps set you apart to where people noticed that, hey, you've got some potential talents to not just work with people, but lead and manage people? What do you think some of those, items that you just, maybe have shown earlier in your career that moved you into the management track that really fit for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you ultimately have the opportunity to lead, whether that's formally or informally, right? And so, really, my first job as a reliability engineer out of school, I had, I guess I had some informal responsibility from a supervisory perspective, where I had hourly guys that were working with me. They were technicians and things like that. And so I guess I was required to sink or swim, but one way or the other interact with those guys and gals. And so I think that my manager at the time saw how I was doing that on an informal basis, because I didn't have I wasn't in a management position. And so it was really great looking back on it. My first actual management role, because I had 6 people working for me. So in the grand scheme of things, it was a good introduction to managing people, and because it was such a small group, right? But I was a process engineer at the time, and in the plant that I worked in, anytime the production manager was on vacation or he was out on a special assignment or whatever it may be, I got an opportunity to act as production manager. And so I think that maybe the lesson to learn, or the thing to keep in the back of your mind, is you're going to have opportunities to send a message to people that you're interested in a management position if you want, by taking those opportunities. I could have said no when the production manager went on vacation, and they would have had somebody else fill in. But I took that on every chance that I got. 1, to learn, and then 2, to send a message to upper management that I wanted to have an opportunity, and that I was going to position myself to be ready for an opportunity by getting that experience, in small snippets. And then when it was a quality manager position came open, he actually came to me and said, "Hey, would you be interested?" And he came not because of my background, because I didn't have a chemistry background or chemical engineering background, which is more typical for quality managers in cement plants. But I think he had confidence in my ability to, 1, learn, and 2, to work with others. And so he felt like that I could figure out the rest, if you will.
So when opportunity knocks, open the door, as the adage goes, right?
Exactly.
But then, of course, there's the adder to that of usually what you see standing in the doorway is dressed in overalls and looks a whole lot like work, which is true. I mean, rarely does opportunity come along where there's nothing required of the person who answers or opens the door. So when you were saying, yes to these opportunities to kind of dip your toe into some of these leadership roles, these management roles, were you ever trying to think about, or maybe in the back of your mind, almost kind of like risk manage, like, okay, I want to try this out, but if something bad should happen, how can I make that as minimal as possible, but still getting the most benefit out of the experience?
Yes and no. So I'll try to make sure that I explain that clearly rather than a non-answer.
I like all of the above answer. That's fine too.
Exactly. Yeah. No, truthfully, I guess I was looking at it from a holistic perspective, in that I was looking at how it would impact my life as a whole, and not just my work or career, right? And so, one of the drivers, and I think it's a driver in at least a lot of our decisions, is, what does that look like for my life outside of work, right? And so I had moved to Colorado to take that process engineering position, and honestly, I fell in love with Colorado. And you know this from being in the industry and making a lot of moves yourself,
yep.
is the typical life of a cement plant engineer that's moving up is going to be relocating geographically. And I quickly decided that I wanted to stay in Colorado. And so I knew that if I took an opportunity when it came within the plant that I was currently working, that would I guess help me stay here because I still live in Colorado, rather than be pushed to take an opportunity when it came up somewhere else. So that risk mitigation piece was less trying to insulate myself from making a mistake of taking that position, and more risk mitigation through getting pressured to move or relocate when I didn't really want to. I don't know if that makes sense, but
no, it does kind of make sense. I mean, that's taking in, because you're right. I was asking strictly from the perspective of, professional. So it's kind of, and you do projects now. So you kind of, where's my risk in this? How do I mitigate it? So one of those things could be like, okay, if I'm going to take this role, how much, I don't want to say work, because there's work with every job that comes into it, but how much unknown is there going to be for that's going to hold me back or make the position extremely difficult to where the potential for failure is now possible? Whereas, okay, are there ways that I can shorten that gap of the knowledge, unknown that's within there, so then I don't worry about failure as much, or if failure happens, it's at such small increments that it doesn't sink the ship, if that makes sense.
Right. No, I think that's totally valid. And that's definitely been a bigger factor in other decisions that I've made. In some of those opportunities, I think that risk is a little bit less at play. At least it was for me at that time, because I felt like I was working for a person that I trusted, right? And so because of that trust that was there, I didn't feel like it was a huge risk of, hey, I'm going to fail at this and then what? It was much more of, hey, this is an opportunity, and I'm going to be working for someone that I'm going to learn a lot from, and that it's going to help me in the future. And if I get into something and I don't know how, they're gonna support me to get me the training or the resources or whatever I may need to be successful. Along those lines, I've had other opportunities that I've turned down. I had a handful over the years of opportunities to leave my prior company and go to work for another company. And that was much more of a risk analysis, right? I remember talking to one guy that I had a lot of respect for. He was an older gentleman, and had an opportunity to go in. It was a manufacturing facility. It was a greenfield plant, and they had found me and thought that I would be a good fit for managing this greenfield facility. And so I interviewed with them. It seemed like it was going to go somewhere, and so I started asking a lot of questions. And this one gentleman, he said, from his perspective, is you're leaving all of these knowns and you're taking on a lot of unknowns. And so the new knowns has to involve a really big carrot, because there's a lot of risk involved, right? Because with your current job, you know what you have, and really stepping into something new, there's much more unknowns than knowns. So what's that carrot that's going to entice you to push all those unknowns to the side and go for it? Take the leap.
Yeah, it's balancing the, creating asymmetrical risks so that there's less risk and more reward. And sometimes, it's interesting from what you're talking about. It sounds like there was a lot of risk, so you have to put a whole lot of reward out there, which, we'll get a little nerdy from the math here. But I mean, if you look at the delta between those two, it probably wasn't all that much. But if you look at the delta from where you were towards, risk or towards reward, was probably huge. And I wonder if sometimes that's where people, they only look at the delta between the risk reward, and they don't look at the actual distance between where they are versus the risk and versus the reward. And is that full distance, that gap, really worth what they're getting themselves into?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, we make uninformed decisions all the time, right?
Right.
Unfortunately, and
Right.
sometimes those work out and sometimes they don't. But yeah, I mean, the goal is is to not make those uninformed decisions, and I think as engineers, we probably have the propensity to um, maybe not make as many of them, but yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah, or by default, we just make some pretty graphs and charts that make us feel like we made the right decision, and we can go from there, right?
Gives you warm and fuzzy, right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. This will look good on a PowerPoint, so I think I can explain this later. Yeah, and just I kind of bring that up because I like the idea that you kept saying yes, but it sounds like you were having a lot of the conversation up front with an open dialogue with the person you're having, saying, "Yeah, I would love to take that, but I know this is an area I'm going to be weak in. How are we going to work through that, or around that, or whatever it might be."
Yeah, and I think one of the advantages that just I guess comes along with some of those things by accident or by default maybe is getting into like a management position when there's a lot that you don't know. It's kind of out of your wheelhouse. It requires you to depend on other people, right? And most people on a team, they want their manager having faith in them and giving them responsibility and giving them an opportunity um, to do something, and be a part of it. And all too often, I know I've seen in my own experiences, leaders come in that, hey, I can do every single job of every person that works for me, and there's value in that, but there's also risk, right? That you don't trust the people, or you think that you can do it better. Hey, let me show you. And so there's some negatives that can come with that. And so what I found is that it required me to really lean on some of the people in my team, and then also say, okay, because I'm leaning on you, then I'm going to support you in these other ways, right? So we are a team, and it created a good environment, at least initially.
So I believe this was your boss that you were talking with at the times, but it sounds like it could have been a mentor as well. And I don't know, did you view it as kind of a mentor mentee relationship, not so much an org chart relationship?
Yeah, you're talking about when I first kind of got into to management roles earlier on.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that was for sure. I mean, he was a boss, but definitely began to look at him as a mentor, and then we continued that relationship. So, he was the plant manager at the time, and he eventually retired, and I took his position as plant manager, and we remained in close connection during my time as a plant manager, and he's since moved geographically, but we still talk at least once a quarter, if not more, and catch up. And there are often times where I need to bat something around, and I'll just give him a buzz and talk something through. And I think, man, I think those relationships are invaluable. And for me, earlier in my life, both from I guess a personal perspective as well as a work perspective, I had some of those mentors by accident. I just had some older people, mostly men, that were in my life that acted as that and took on that role. And then as I started kind of connecting the dots as I got older, in college and after, post college, I started purposefully seeking those mentors out. Like, hey, I need this. I need these people that I can go to, and they're going to give me, good advice, or they're going to, at times it's not advice, but they're going to ask me really good questions that's going to help me collect my thoughts and make a better decision. So yeah, I think that those people are super important, and I was blessed to have a boss for quite a few years that acted as that and continued after our professional relationship was ended. He continued to act as that mentor for many years.
Sounds fantastic from the way I'll buy too. Uh, um, so with the relationship that you had with your mentor and even some of the other mentors that you had, what so let's say if you could build the perfect mentor, if that makes sense, what are some of the qualities that you saw in the mentor that really provided you a lot of value, but then kind of flip that around? And the second part of the question would be, what parts do you think you added a lot of value to the mentor? Because at least when I've talked with people, that mentor-mentee relationship, it's not student teacher. It's
Mm-hmm.
definitely a give and take on both sides. It's just the give and the take are completely different depending on which side of the table you're on.
Yeah. So the first part, I feel like I can answer pretty quickly. You're going to challenge me with that second part for sure, but I guess first, and I'm giving advice that I was given, but when it came to, or it comes to, choosing a mentor or seeking someone out, I guess first and foremost is looking at someone's life from all aspects and saying, this is someone that has kind of got it figured out, right? And not just looking at a piece of the pie. And I've had other people tell me the opposite. And so let me just, I guess, explain a little bit to make sure it's clear. Is that I have tried to look at people that they have a good marriage, a strong marriage, and they care about their spouse. They have kids and they love their kids. They're involved with their kids. They're they still to this day are actively engaged with their kids, and their kids love them back, right? Financially, that they've done well and they've made wise financial decisions, and then their career, that they've been successful, and I guess at least in my eyes, how I view success in a lot of ways, right? So kind of these handful of areas that I think are important, that I want to choose a mentor that I see has been, let's say, quote unquote, successful in how I value things in those different areas. Now, I've had people tell me, seek out, like if you're concerned with finances, for instance, then seek out the guy that is, super wealthy and has made really good decisions when it comes to finances. Well, I think there's some value in that, but if their kids hate them and, they're lonely, but they do really well at finances, well, I'm not so sure that I want to, take all of their advice, right? And so, truthfully, as I've tried to look at someone, that when you take the collective whole of who they are and how they've lived their life, that it aligns with where I want to be in the future, right? And then that's been the driver of me saying, okay, hey, this is a person that I want to spend more time with and understand the why behind the what, that I want to understand how they've lived their life and what's been, their motivation behind making different decisions, saying yes when they said yes and saying no when they said no, because I think that's more important, right? I don't want to be too one-sided about things. And so I saw that, this guy, his name is Steve, and he was my boss for a long time. Again, continues to be, someone that's a part of my life. I saw that in him, right, in large part. And I've had, I've had the opportunity to have other mentors in my life, and I've used that same or similar criteria of saying, what are the things that I value in my life? Where do I want to be in the future? And is this someone that kind of fits that mold, right? And I have someone that I meet pretty regularly with now, and he's an architect, lives relatively close by, and he's just that. He's, I believe he has a really good relationship with his wife. My wife actually meets with his wife as kind of a mentor-mentee relationship as well. So sometimes he and I'll get together, and our wives will get together. Sometimes we'll get together, all four of us. They are a part of my kids' life. They love my kids and vice versa. He has two grown children, and they're healthy, and they have good jobs, and they're making a positive impact on society, if you will. They have a strong faith. That's an important part of my life, and something that I value. And then from a career perspective, I think he's made wise career decisions. He's a partner in a firm, and it continues to be successful. So I look at all of these things and say, okay, that's he's 60 or 61, and I see what he's done and how far he's come and where he's at today, and say, I would like to be in a similar place when I'm 60. So therefore, this is someone that I can learn a lot from. Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes complete sense. I mean, I love that attitude of separating out. Do I need to find, a subject matter expert, a teacher? And I agree with your point on the finance that you brought up. Can he show me how to make a lot of money? Yeah, but if it's at the expense of all of these other things that I value, then you try to kind of, knock off the edges and keep the pieces that make sense. But that's a little difficult, right? Because you don't know what really makes sense from the information, because his perspective is so vastly different. So it's sometimes it's even hard to distill down the takeaways. Whereas what you're looking for is a person where their perspective is very similar and in line with yours. So now when you get information back, it sounds like you don't have to go through and vet like all the pieces of the information, because at least they're coming from a similar vantage point, or at least their intentions are in line with yours. So even if their perspective is greatly different, you can still look at them and go, well, we still hold enough things in common that let me take on their perspective for a little while and stretch my brain. I love the idea of it.
Yeah, I mean, decisions aren't made in a vacuum. So, one decision that you make with respect to your finances is going to have an impact on, your marriage or your kids or, whatever it may be, right? And so I think compartmentalizing things too much, and I think specifically when we're talking about searching for a mentor, right? Not to say that you don't go to that subject matter expert because they know finances better than anything, that is their thing. Oh, for sure. I mean, go to them. There's things to learn, but specifically, at least for me, when you're seeking out a mentor, I believe that they've got to have a majority of those boxes that are important to you checked, or they don't make the cut from my perspective.
Yeah, it completely makes sense. I mean, you just got to know what you're asking the question to gain. Like, who am I asking? What do I want to get out of it? And if you package it correctly, then it's great. If you're trying to get more nebulous, answers out of things, then it may not be the best choice for you.
Right.
No, that makes complete sense as far as looking for a potential mentor. So when you enter into the relationship, what have you done as a mentee that you think has allowed you to get the most value, or at least reciprocate value to the mentor in that stance, in that kind of situation?
Yeah. So I think, one of the things that I try to do is be, intentional and have a purpose when we get together. And so, I usually come with, at least a topic, if not multiple topics. So say, Dave and I are going to get together for coffee. I've usually thought about it beforehand, and I'm like, man, I really want to discuss this situation and get his feedback. And there's value added, and there's also, I think, a message that you send to that person of, hey, I'm not trying to waste your time. Not that just getting together and shooting the breeze can't add some value, but I think that there's a respect level that you send that message of, I'm respectful of you taking out an hour to sit down and have coffee with me, and so I really want to utilize that hour, right? And so I guess that's one piece that I try to make sure that it has value, is being prepared. And then as far as that reciprocal side of it, I think it's a great question, because honestly, it's not something that I've thought a significant amount about, and I think it depends on the relationship that you have with that person. And for instance, so I gave you the example of my wife meeting with this guy's his wife, and one of the statements he made is that he believes my wife gives his wife insight into her daughter-in-laws, right? So they have 2 boys, and so therefore she's having this, these relationships with daughter-in-laws, and she's trying to get that perspective. And so my wife brings her and gives her some of that insight, right? And probably by accident in some ways. And so I think that you're exactly right, that we do provide reciprocal value, even though we're in large part looking to pluck our umbilical cord into a mentor and just take. It doesn't work that way, right? It does go both ways, but I think it depends on the type of relationship and the nature of it and that sort of thing. I think that there is for sure this sense of appreciation that mentors have, knowing that they are impacting other people through the things that they've learned. And the mentors that I've had have really been very open and honest with wanting to share the things that they've learned. And I think that that's something that comes with age and maturity is, man, hey, I've been through these hard knocks and I've learned a lot of lessons. And if I can help someone, then I want to do that, right? And that's another one of those, I guess, value boxes, so to speak, that someone that can ultimately be a really good mentor is going to want to do that. And then they gain, I guess, a sense of appreciation, but from knowing they're kind of, I guess, giving back.
Right. Yeah, it's something that I've heard a couple of different times in, either reading or something like that, like when you have power, when you have true power is when you can actually give it away. And somehow that allows you to have even more power and influence, is the fact you just keep giving, experiences out and so on and so forth. It's a little different than where some people feel like, once you've hit a certain level, you got to protect your island and can't let anybody else come in. And it can be very devastating when you work with those people. Like, they don't want to share anything. It really stifles a lot of the potential organic growth that can take place. So no, I agree.
Yeah.
It's definitely worth getting a mentor where it is reciprocal. Do you currently have any mentees, any young Padawans?
I do not. I do not formally. I have a new employee that's working for me now, and it's in a new role that's new to me, outside my comfort zone. And so, I hope to have a good relationship with him and take on some of that, but nothing formal. No.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, there's always the informal versus formal. I mean, I don't have any direct mentees per se, but I'm sure you have people that come up for your experience and your point of view. So I almost kind of look at that as the abridged version of that mentor-mentee relationship of, hey, you've been down that path before. What do you think?
No question. Yeah, no question.
Definitely happens in different sizes and forms. So what else I found was interesting is you worked in heavy industry for a good amount of time, and then you, like myself, we went to the dark side and we became vendors into the industry that we were working in, as well as other heavy industries. So before you made the switch, what are some of the interesting changes that you saw within the cement industry and still see within the cement industry? Like, what are kind of the interesting, like, you're like, wow, I didn't expect that to change within the industry while you were in there?
I guess interesting changes.
Or just something that surprised you when you were in the industry. You're like, oh, I didn't really quite see that coming. That was, or good or bad. It really doesn't matter.
Yeah. I was probably a little surprised with the recent push, and I've seen more and more companies pushing toward kind of a lean manufacturing. And I guess that kind of caught me off guard. I think that there's a lot of really good, I guess, lean manufacturing, Six Sigma type, philosophy that's out there. And I think it has the potential to impact industry. I haven't seen a lot of companies that I think have figured it out yet to really tap into how it adds a significant amount of value specifically to the bottom line. But I do think that companies are trying to to innovate and leverage some of the practices from other industries and bring those into cement and other heavy industrial manufacturing. So I think that's one of the things that kind of comes to mind that caught me off guard a little bit. And I'm still watching. I know that, and I still encounter it with different companies that I work with now that have some type of, continuous improvement, lean manufacturing type, operating philosophy, if you will. But I still haven't found somebody that I think is doing it really, really well. And so I'm waiting for the first company that at least I think really figured it out.
Yeah, it's a good point. Back in my days, that was it was always talked about, and you remember this probably as well as I do. I mean, Toyota was a monster with this back during my younger process engineering days and stuff like that. And so the 5
Toyota
Ys.
way.
Yeah, I mean the Toyota way, the 5 Ys, was a big one that we were using within some of the process departments that I was within. But you're right, like getting to the Six Sigma portion, like I haven't seen, and again, I haven't done a deep amount of investigating into it, but yeah, from the heavy industry side, I mean, yeah, I've seen it in semiconductors and things of that nature where you have an individual like finished product, like an actual widget. I just haven't seen people do it in the rock dust industries. They've done parts and they've picked and choose the things that make sense, but definitely it's not the same scale that you see them elsewhere. But that is true. I would definitely agree with that kind of perspective that it looks like the industry finally became open to outside ideas, which I think has been very helpful.
Yeah, agreed.
So I want to be respectful of your time. I know we're getting close to almost an hour here. I feel like we should definitely get back together sometime in the future, do kind of a part 2 and see what's changed, something of that nature, what's going on with you. We can even talk about more of your trip over to the dark side as a business development manager for a construction company, which has been pretty awesome when you've been telling me about the stuff you've been working on. So that sounds like a lot of fun that I think we should dig into in the future. So with that being said, if people wanted to connect with you, hear more about your story, get to know you a little better, what are some of the ways that they could do that out in the vast interwebs of the internet?
Sure. Yeah. I'm on LinkedIn, which I think is one of the career-centered social media platforms. So just Shane Wilson on LinkedIn. You can find me, and then I am on Twitter. I'm not as active as I once was, but definitely you can find me on Twitter. I'm at B Shane Wilson. So the letter B, Shane Wilson on Twitter. So you can look me up.
Fantastic. I'll make sure all that stuff's in the show notes as well, so people will be able to click on you, find you, and look for career advice or the occasional cat gif or something like that on Twitter. I haven't figured out Twitter yet. I keep trying, but I haven't quite figured it out yet. Anyways, Shane, definitely appreciate all of your time. That was great insight on mentor-mentee relationships. So thank you again, and you have yourself a fantastic rest of the day.
Thanks, Matt. It was great. I appreciate it.
Fantastic interview with Shane. Really enjoyed his perspective on picking mentors and really the holistic approach of finding someone to work with. I like the way he takes a look at taking on risk, new jobs, what he's trying to mitigate, how he evaluates that. Just a really good all around, I think just a good foundational way to evaluate what you want to do with your career. So definitely check him out. Look him up on LinkedIn and LinkedIn and Twitter. And if you want to follow me and more information about this podcast, give me some feedback, you can find me on Instagram and Twitter with the handle DevittMatt. You can also find me on LinkedIn at Matt Devitt as well. And once again, I appreciate everybody who's following me on this podcast, everybody who shared and commented. I mean, if you're finding this impactful to you and you think it'll help somebody else, by all means, please share. So once again, remember everybody, growth happens between dawn and dusk.